Hello everybody, CVH here with Between the Lanes with another deck tech today. As you can see from the title, today we'll be talking about the Item Sorcerer deck. This is a deck for which I've done a couple videos recently, the gameplay highlight videos, so if you haven't seen those, be sure to check those out for a more accurate look at how the deck actually performs on the ladder in a variety of matchups. If you haven't seen those, I'll be linking them at the end, so no need to leave the video quite yet and watch the deck tech first. As you can see, I also titled this Jerry T. Sorcerer because the original list, which was only 2 cards different, was built by Jerry Thompson, saw it on Twitter, and I gave it a shot. So, give a shout out to Jerry Thompson there. Good Magic player, good Legends player as well. But yeah, this deck is something I've had a good amount of success with, so I did want to go over it. You might be noticing already some pretty stark similarities between this deck and the Item Assassin deck that I also did a deck tech on kind of recently. This is simply using the Sorcerer shell instead of the Assassin shell, losing things like the Giant Bat Mentor's Ring combo, gaining some other areas. But as you can see, many of the combos that you would pull off with that deck are still applicable to this deck, and one of the primary goals is to pull them off. You have the Master of Arms and the new Gardener of Swords from the Madhouse collection, in conjunction with your good items like Mace of Encumbrance and Tome of Alteration at the core of the item package there, along with Daggerfall Mages and the Skilled Blacksmiths, of course. So that's really your main package, and that's where a lot of the value in this deck and the other deck comes from. But yeah, without further ado, let's get right into the curve. I suppose I should talk about the 2 cards I changed first. I took out the 1 copy of Lesser Ward and the 1 copy of the Firestorm that Jerry was teching. The meta didn't seem quite right for Firestorm when I was starting to play this deck, but it might have changed until now. But I did have good success with the Royal Sages as well, because the deck didn't really have a solid 4-drop play besides Tome of Alteration and if you needed to Lightning Bolt something. So I think this card is pretty good. The Firestorm, however, depending on the meta, might need to come in, but that's more of a tech choice. So without further ado, let's talk about the actual curve like usual. 3 Crown Quartermaster, just a really solid 1-drop, probably the best 1-drop you could really be playing in these colors, since it kind of goes hand in hand with your item synergy. Getting to play the 1-cost dagger for free with Skilled Blacksmith is nice a lot of the time, helps you trade up in the future. It would also, I did see a version of Item Sorcerer that ran Iliac Sorcerer. It would be nice to include this card, because there are so many ways to buff its attack power that once it loses its ward, when you double the power, it gets very large for a 1-drop. Unfortunately, it has negative interactions with your Cunning Ally, and one of the main strengths of this deck is how often Cunning Ally does hit. So we have the Firebolts, not much to say there. Enchanted Plate, this is a value item, obviously. It's pretty good when you can draw multiple cards with Tome of Alteration or Enchanted Plate. This deck has a lot of ways to keep the steam going later in the game and trade favorably. This helps you do both of those. I did hear from one of my subscribers that he tested a version with Daedric Dagger instead of the Enchanted Plates for a bit more removal because he felt the draw power was a little redundant. So that's something to test. I haven't personally tested it yet, but there are a lot of ways you could change this deck a little bit. That is just one of many avenues you could take some of the card choices. This deck has a lot of room to adapt and change, so that's one thing you could try. 3 Shrieking Harpy, fantastic prophecy, fits in with the deck perfectly when it's trying to race. Skilled Blacksmith, don't really need to talk about this too much. Wardcrafter, another fine card. Windkey Spellsword, basically the 2 drops you'd expect. Nothing really out of the ordinary here. Just help you accomplish your game plan of being aggressive early and getting value out of your items and making it hard to trade into your stuff. Nothing feels better with Wardcrafter than Wardcrafting some giant thing that you've itemed already so they can't Lightning Bolt it down and trade into it. The 2 Cumlorn Sentinels, pretty good anti-aggro card, and there's a good amount of aggro going around right now. It's only a 2 of in this list, but of course if you're trying to tech heavier against aggro, it could easily go up to a 3 of. Cunning Ally, like I said, a fantastic card and a deck that can support it, and this deck can definitely support it. I already talked about Gardener of Swords, one of the key parts of the deck, in conjunction with a couple other 3-drop slots in the deck, which are Daggerfall Mage and Mace of Encumbrance. Both of these cards really just do what the deck wants them to do. Daggerfall Mage, I got a couple questions on my stream about the Assassin item deck and this deck. If there are any replacements for Daggerfall Mage. Unfortunately, this is one of the decks where I'd say the legendary, Daggerfall Mage in this case probably is just irreplaceable. It's probably your consistently best 3-drop, and it's giving you extra Tome of Alterations, which you really need in order to get any sort of functionality out of the deck moving towards turn 6+. And a lot of the matchups you're going to find yourself in, you might have to play the defensive role early on and then come back with some of those value plays, or if you're up against a deck like Control Mage or Ramp Scout, they're pretty crucial to winning the game, is getting tomes, drawing the cards, dealing damage at the same time, getting them in the graveyard, and then recycling them with Master of Arms and hopefully Gardener of Swords as well. So yeah, I wouldn't play this deck without Daggerfall Mage. Emmerich is an insanely good card, but less necessary to the deck's overall success, I would say, than Daggerfall Mage. So Gardener of Swords, fantastic, talked about a lot in Item Sorcerer. It seemed like it would be too vulnerable when I was first looking over it, but some of these combos that you can pull off are pretty obscene, and if you check out the gameplay videos later in the video, I'll link them, of course, like I said. If you check those out, you'll be able to see some of what I'm talking about. And Mace of Encumbrance. Shackle's becoming very good right now because a lot of racing is happening. If you can double Shackle with Gardener of Swords, that can often put your opponent just too far behind. It's gotten to the point where on the ladder I've actually seen a bit of Dress Renegade on the ladder in unironic legend ranked decks. I'm not gonna say that I'm pro or anti Dress Renegade. I haven't run it myself, if that gives you any indication of my opinion, but that just goes to show you how powerful the Shackle mechanic is right now. Young Mammoth, probably just, besides, Daggerfall Mage, even though the only reason this card is better than Daggerfall is because it's huge, but that's like why you'd play it. Sometimes you just need a 4/4 on board, and sometimes Daggerfall is just too slow to trade into. Sometimes you need to deal with a Mournhold trader, you play Young Mammoth Wardcrafter up the next turn. Young Mammoth is one of the reasons I'm sure that Jerry went in these colors, Windkeep Spellsword being objectively one of the best 2-drops in the game, Mammoth being objectively one of the best 3-drops. I'm sure the only reason they didn't consider Young Mammoth broken in the development of the card was the fact that it was an Endurance, which isn't a primarily aggressive color, but if you're playing an aggressive deck that uses Endurance like this, it's perfectly reasonable in my opinion. More than reasonable. I think you should just play it as 3 of probably. I think it's a great card. Really helps you push that aggression early, which, like I said, this deck wants to do. It does have some, like I said, the Master of Arms Tome gives it some viability later in the game, but the reason for that is basically because Master of Arms getting Tome of Alterations back turns into a large, pushing more damage Triumphant Jarl. It's going to draw you multiple cards, which you can then leverage into damage to your opponent's face, because this deck is trying to close the game out, it's not trying to stall indefinitely, it's eventually going to have to push, and Mammoth helps you do that very, very well. Lightning Bolt, probably don't need to explain, now that it's 2017, why Lightning Bolt is good. It's a good 3 of in this deck, though. Royal Sage I did talk about, as I included it because it's the only true 4-drop, like the on-curve 4-drop, saying that we don't really have a board that, Tome would require an existing board, Lightning Bolt requires an existing threat to deal with. Obviously, Tome on one thing is sometimes better than Royal Sage on one other thing, or just itself. But yeah, Royal Sage pretty much always gets its effect off in this deck because you're going to be pretty aggressive. The only real concern is if you're up against a deck like Aggro Battle Mage, which can get under you. There are certain decks that are definitely faster, and you have to play the more defensive role early, for which the Tech Firestorm would be a much better inclusion. But for what I was playing against, I was feeling pretty confident against the aggro decks and the mid-range decks I was playing against, and Royal Sage really helps you push. If you get a little bit far ahead, Royal Sage can turn that into a pretty exponential lead. Tome of Alteration, already talked about it, was really underappreciated until the Gardener of Swords came out, but between Gardener of Swords and the Master of Arms now, Tome is a key function of this deck. As you can see, it's running the full 3 of package. Master of Arms we've talked about so much as a late game tool for this deck that I don't really think I need to harp on it anymore. Check out some of the videos of gameplay if you want to see more of this card in action, or the Item Assassin deck tech. This card is perfectly great, gets your maces back, gets your tomes back, and even in a pinch, if you've only played Enchanted Plates, it can get those back too. I think I've only played a raw Master of Arms like once or twice. Very unlucky when that happens. At worst, you get like a plate and a steel dagger from Ground Quartermaster back, which, isn't great, but it's something to do and it's going to help you cycle a bit. And that's one reason I'm sure Jerry included the plates and the tomes, just to have that consistency of draw power late in the game against decks that you really want to be drawing cards against, like Ramp Scout or Control Mage if you're playing against those. I could see switching out some of the cards if the meta changes completely, like I said, to maybe the Firestorm again, the Daedric Dagger, a lot of things to test. But yeah, Emmerich, last card, shouldn't have to talk about why this card is good. It's basically just oozing value, and yeah, I think it's objectively one of the best cards in the game. Unfortunately, only Sorcerer decks can use it, but I do think at the moment there is no reason every Sorcerer deck shouldn't be using Emmerich, aside from the fact that one may not own this unique legendary or feel like they want to craft it, which is a fair reason for sure, since the game is still pretty young and people's soul gems are a premium. But yeah, if you have Emmerich, I would just put in this deck. Very, very good. We have a lot of wards that can, leverage the effect and deal 6 or even 8 points of damage at the same time. We're not really a ward sorcerer deck, but we do have Wardcrafter, Windkeep Spellsword, and Daggerfall Mage in addition to the Emmerich itself. And whenever Royal Sage gets ward on something, we don't run the 1 copy of Lesser Ward. Besides that, we are running a lot of good cards that happen to have ward on them. So that's pretty much the list. It functions pretty well. I've had a lot of reasonable success with it on the ladder, and I know friends like Bad Wolf Gaming and of course Jerry have pushed very hard on the ladder with this deck as well. Maybe a couple cards different, and like I said, people are experimenting with it and trying a little bit of different things, so I encourage you to try some different things with it and let me know what you find. And I believe this deck, and other item decks like it are a pretty firm establishment in the metagame now. And a lot of that's thanks to Gardener of Swords, so really cool card, and glad it's giving birth to these new strategies. As always, if you've liked the video, feel free to check out other strategy articles on Between the Lanes, feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel and check out other deck techs and gameplay videos here. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.